Just a quick mic check, guys. Can you hear me okay? Check, check. How are the levels, guys? Can you hear me okay? Excellent. We've got about 25 minutes before I'm actually supposed to start the stream. I'm just going to leave the advertisement up for now. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and feel free to ask. I'll go ahead and answer questions while I'm sitting here waiting for it to get started. We'll give folks a chance to actually show up at the appointed hour, and then we'll get started where we were previously with our fortress. We're going to have to discuss making our dormitory into a proper room, something that I neglected to do in the first episode and didn't catch until after I'd logged off for the evening. We're going to have to get our dining room set up, get our forges up and running, get some curtain walls and bridges built so that we can seal ourselves off in the event of an attack. At this point, we're going to be handling, from here on in, pretty much trade and defense are the two major things we're going to have to handle. I'll touch on food preparation there at the beginning, but last episode we'd already started doing our planting, and plants pretty much take care of themselves, so it's really just a matter of getting enough of a food stockpile built up that the crops can catch up, and getting some booze taken care of so that we've got some booze to get us through until our farms can take over on our plant supplies. I'm looking at probably we're going to run from the 7 o'clock hour back through till 10 or 11 like we did last night. By then, we will have gone through fall and probably winter, and we'll be into the following spring at some point. Depending on how, of course, how many questions we get, we probably will have fewer this time. I'll spend more time on play than I will on setup and issues outside the game, meta game type issues. So if you guys have any questions as we're going along, as before, feel free to ask. The whole point of this is as an educational experience. So if there's things that you want to know or things you want to see, or I'm not explaining something clearly enough, chime in, ask it right then and there, and I'll stop and take care of it like this is a very informal classroom type setting. That's really the goal here, is that so that the viewers can not just watch me play Dwarf Fortress, but understand uh, the actions I'm performing and why I'm doing it. Actually, come to think of it, as I'm reviewing our notes from our last episode, we also didn't actually connect the well to the brook, did we? We dug it out. It's still dry, though, as I recall, isn't it? We'll have to get that connected up so I can demonstrate pressure in action and or reload my game if I've built my well wrong. It should be okay. I don't think I made any mistakes that will cause it to flood, but I want to take care of that first to make sure that we didn't have a brain fart that caused me to connect something up directly instead of just diagonally. Um, so we'll get our well connected up. We'll get our food and booze shortage taken care of. We should start to see our second migration wave, that first fall wave, in a few dwarf days um, from when we start. At which point, I'm hopeful that I'll have enough hands available to take care of pretty much any task I'm going to need in the short term. And by the time we get our winter wave, we'll really be able to start spinning the place up in terms of getting defenses built en masse. Um, I know for you new folks who are used to using the Dwarf Fortress interface exclusively, Dwarf Therapist seems, kind of an interesting thing at first, and it's neat that you can do it with a couple of button clicks, but it's not until you see an entire hauler wave suddenly assigned to masonry and your curtain walls going up 30 and 40 people at a time with two button clicks that you really start to see the power of that additional interface. Once our magma chamber starts getting filled up, because we haven't even finished digging it out yet, thinking we should be able to get to that tonight as well. We'll also show you Dig V so that you can see how I track and mine out veins without having to spend as much of my player resource on that problem as you have to in Vanilla Dwarf Fortress, uh, creating a semi-automated solution that will go through and mine out the particular minerals I need. So when I go hunt for iron, for example, to make my first set of equipment for my military dwarves, you'll see me using Dig V to auto mark the veins for extraction for the iron and copper we have on the site. No one has any questions from the stuff we covered last night. Nobody has any things they want to make sure that we cover as we're going through the final aspects of our food and wells, as we're getting our forges set up. Nothing in particular they want to see or that they're curious about. I haven't had a whole lot of luck getting the folks who've commented on the Reddit thread to actually tell me any of the things that they're actually interested in terms of getting set up and running. So I'm not sure if it's just a case that I'm really doing a great job of explaining it, or nobody wants to be the guy that points out that I'm not doing it perfectly. I guess while we're waiting here before we get started, are there any? Has anybody looked at the DF hack tools? Are there any questions about particular plugins? Now's a real good time for me to go ahead and cover the things I might not used in my own play that I might have touched or experimented with in DF hack. I mean, there's a voluminous list of things, and a lot of them I don't typically use. Some of them are debug tools, for example. Yes, I will be covering harvesting sheep. Now, that might not be in this episode. I can do it. We have a few sheep who are mature and can provide us with some wool and milk. It's actually very, very simple once you get it set up. Um, I'll have to look. I think we made connection to the caverns last episode, didn't we? Anybody remember? I'll have to look when we first start. Okay, if we didn't actually connect to the caverns, that's the first thing I'll have to do before I can get the pastures set up for the sheep. That's a very simple process. It just means I dig a staircase and we punch a hole in the caverns and floor it back up. It's very, very trivial. Once I've got the pastures set up, we already created the farmer's workshop in the pasture space. We used it to make cheese last time. We will use that for shearing the sheep, milking the sheep, and making cheese from the milk. And you'll basically just queue those three things up on repeat: shear, milk, cheese, and let them run. And your dwarves will come along, grab any available sheep who are eligible. They will shear them, milk them, and make cheese from their milk. And then they'll start the cycle again with the next sheep. And you'll basically just run through your sheep at that point. We'll need to get an input stockpile set up to move the unprocessed thread, the unprocessed wool, I should say, off to a cloth and leather area. I tend to put those on one floor. We'll have to do that at some point. But yeah, sometime in the next episode or two episodes, I'll demonstrate it. We probably won't have a significantly large population of sheep for quite some time. It takes a while because I only brought one female with me at Embark. Um, if we get lucky and the dwarves bring us more female sheep, or the humans bring us more female sheep, we'll get our population up a little quicker. But generally speaking, when you start with a pair, it takes a fair amount of time before your population builds up enough that you're going to have a substantial supply from your own sources. It's basically, when I bring sheep, I'm planning for the future. I'm looking ahead for, 5 years or 10 years or however many years down the road, when I want to be able to simply, if necessary, button my fortress up and never open the doors again. Do I have everything inside my fortress that I could conceivably want or need without having to import it? About the only thing we won't have when we first start is that we haven't really got into planning for yet is fuel in the form of coal or charcoal. And at some point down the road, I'll demonstrate, what I do to get around that with a tree farm underground. Um, yeah, I do use DF Hack, Jack Bandit. I don't use it heavily. There's only a few convenience tools I use, but yeah, I'm going to demonstrate some of the things. I use Dig V for marking veins, so I don't have to keep watching dwarves mine all day, and I can go build structures elsewhere while my miners are doing their job in an automated fashion. I hate to say it, but Toadie's got a ways to go in terms of his interface being user friendly. I love the game, but I'm not gonna inflict carpal tunnel on myself in order to use the base default interface. There's a reason why I've got Dwarf Therapist running. I'm going to use Dwarf Therapist as well, just so I can work around it. I've demonstrated a couple of the more cheaty type commands from the DF Hack kit in terms of like reveal and prospect, but typically I don't bother with those unless I'm looking for something very specific, or I want to make sure that a particular underground structure isn't going to run into a cavern along the way. Generally speaking, I don't use them at all, um, unless I'm looking for coal, for example. No, I'm not going to use like fast dwarf or I probably won't even use things like auto dump. I might demonstrate auto dump for the folks who want to see it, but I'm not going to be using it in a mechanically beneficial sense. You won't see me using anything like that. I'll be using dig circle, dig V. You are going to see dwarf monitor for the happiness of my dwarves on screen, basically. Uh, I may have to at some point use some of the bug fix workaround commands like dry buckets or clean, clean map, because unfortunately dwarves, those features just aren't implemented properly yet. The fact that dwarves cannot empty a bucket full of water to draw water from a well is one of those things where I look at it and go, wow, that's really, really stupid, but that's the way it's implemented currently, so I'll work around it. The moment where Toady starts fixing things so I don't have to use this is a day when I'm going to just applaud and be very happy about it, but I'm not really going to sweat using these tools. There's no benefit to me as a player in insisting on my purity. It's not my version of Dwarf Therapist. While I am a coder, I've never put any effort or work into Dwarf Therapist. The Splinter Mind version that I'm using, this is a fork of the base uh, Dwarf. This is a fork of the basic Dwarf Therapist interface. Most of the features are actually the same. There's a few things that they've added to it along the way because the base fork is not really under main development. They're looking to eventually remerge this fork. The link to it is out there in my Reddit post, either the one from yesterday or the one from today. I basically carbon copied and modified the post from yesterday so that I have all the necessary information to pick up and follow along with us in the new post as well as in the old post. You can get a direct link to the Splinter Mind fork from that Reddit post. Somebody got that link handy? If not, I'll go ahead and pull it up here. Hang on a second. This is the link you're going to want here. That link there will take you to the new post. About halfway down my post, you're going to see a reference to a Splinter Mind fork of Dwarf Therapist. That's the version of this utility that I'm using. Additionally, the only other really different things I've included are in DF Hack. There's a particular command that's not in the base install called Dwarf Monitor. You'll see it here in the list right here, Dwarf Monitor. Just installing that is really all I've messed around with it. I haven't played with some of the additional features that it has, but basically it will put a happiness monitor on my screen, like the FPS counter, like the idler counter, so that I can monitor in real time the happiness of my dwarves. When we actually start back up, at least one of my dwarves was down into the range of fine, and you'll see that breakdown. I'll try to remember to point it out when we get underway. I'll kind of demonstrate, a few of these commands, but there's stuff here that are effectively God commands that let you do particular things. Like, for example, liquids actually allows you to create water, magma, or obsidian out of thin air. Optimization option on Therapist. I'm not familiar with this. Oh, you mean the role optimization. You mean like being able to automatically assign your dwarves to jobs based on their roles. Yeah, that option. I don't actually I know that the role feature here when I pull it up is actually going to have the ability to automatically assign dwarves to whatever they're best at. For the first 3, 4, 5 migration waves, my population will probably be 100, 120. And to be honest, having dwarves do the jobs they need done is going to be more important than just assigning them to whatever they're best at. If I'm looking and I've got more dwarves that I know what to do with, and at that point, whether I make a dwarf a hauler or some type of specialist, is less of a crucial issue. Then at that point, maybe the roles become interesting. But primarily, I hate to say it, but dwarves improve enough through practice in the current version that I don't really see a significant benefit to worrying about what they're best at. I simply go, oh look, I need a dwarf to do this, and oh look, I have a free hauler. Presto, that's the dwarf that's going to do it. And he'll probably end up doing it for the rest of his life, unless it's something I just need one of. I'm not really, I've posted about it on Reddit before, but basically, my dwarves are ants. All my ants are alike, and if my ants die, I'm not really unhappy about it. They're all just ants. Now, as far as where I like embarking personally, I like flat sites, whether they have a volcano or not. I like flat sites with lots of trees and lots of grass. Cue the accusations of me being an elf from all the purists. I've embarked in mountains, but Dwarf Fortress doesn't do a particularly good job of handling elevations down the sides of high, steep cliffs. You can end up with a situation where it's easy to lose track of how many goblins there are unless you pause the game and flip through 12 levels of cliff looking for all the goblin invaders. It's easy to lose track of where a forgotten beast is gone unless you're constantly switching back to the units menu and tabbing to it, basically. Personally, I like flat maps. I love the fact that the game is 3D, but I just don't think it handles verticality on an uneven plane very well. So you end up with situations where it just doesn't appear well to me. I can play on a mountainside, for example. I've done deserts. Partial deserts are actually awesome, especially if you can get like an aquifer in part of it and a non-aquifer in the rest. At that point, you've got infinite power from the aquifer, you've got infinite water from the aquifer, you've got infinite sand from the desert, you've probably got trees from the aquifer section. You will probably have all of the different types of metals and flux and coal and all that stuff that you could conceivably want. Embarking on the edge of like a desert is fantastic. The downside to embarking in a desert is there's not a whole lot of resources aside from sand in the deserts. I guess unless you just happen to embark on a site that's got metals underground, obviously. I mean, in terms of surface resources, there just isn't much. You'll probably have, 12 plants across the entire biome of your embark if it's a desert. I haven't really done a... yeah, you can rush the caverns, but that's all underground plants. And so, see, if you when I pull this up later, you're going to see that I have 2 floors of farms, and one of those floors of farms is specifically for surface plants. And you can do that with a desert, but it makes it a little more difficult. And frankly, I just like being able to pull it up and go, okay, I'm going to go out and pick a bunch of rope reeds, and I'm going to grow my cloth out of that. I've always found it a little odd, personally, that Toady has never implemented underground plants growing in all 4 seasons. So, for example, pigtails can only be grown in the summer and fall, but I can grow rope reeds 4 seasons a year, underground or on the surface, depending on how I rig it. But I can still grow four crops of them a year versus only 2 of pigtails. And I don't understand why the underground plants are seasonal, but the above ground plants are year-round. It seems kind of backwards, I guess. They can store items on the stairs. When you see an up-down staircase, or a down staircase, or an up staircase, that's think of it more like a fireman's pole, basically. The stockpiles do not overlay. If you draw a stockpile over an existing stockpile, you only get the space that's not already a stockpile. So I'll try to show you here. I'll go ahead and pull it up since we're about ready to get started here. I'll go ahead and pull it up and show you what I'm talking about, since there's a question there. Okay, so here's a good example. This is my surface plants farm. We really haven't done anything with this yet because I haven't actually started picking surface plants. But there's 3 stockpiles here. There's a central stockpile inside the farms. This 5x5 square here holds only plants. There's a stockpile that consists of 4 squares in each quadrant right here in the little inner corner. That's my barrel seed stockpile. So, for example, it'll flash when I query it. See, that's one stockpile, and there's another stockpile, and these are all separate stockpiles. Despite the fact that I drew them in order, from inner to outer, when I draw this stockpile and then I draw that one, it only catches the area that was not already made into something else. You can't build a stockpile over buildings. You can't build a stockpile over an existing stockpile. Stairs don't actually count as buildings, so you'll see, for example, as I go up and down, there's stockpiles in the middle right over the top of the stairs. That's perfectly okay. Your dwarves will use them just like normal. Yes, Jack Bandit, I do in fact floor over. You can see I've already started in the last episode flooring over my surface plants. I showed them how to flood an underground area to farm on stone, so we can do underground plants on one floor and surface plants on a second. And then I'll floor over the surface plants. I've done beekeeping underground. If you rig it right, it's not hard to do it that way as well. In fact, it's probably the only safe way to do beekeeping, given building destroyers. So there's a bit of a trick you can pull with that one. We've got a fishing area set up over here that eventually will have surface fishing from indoors. I probably won't touch on beekeeping until much later. It doesn't really produce all that much booze or food. It's sort of a nice optional thing for variety, but it's not particularly... It doesn't seem like it's particularly beneficial to a fortress as a, especially as a primary resource by compared to, pretty much any other food source you can name. I'd do fishing before I would do beekeeping by a fair margin. Got about 3 minutes to go before we get started. I did want to go ahead and take a look. I don't think we actually... No, we did not. You guys are correct. We definitely did not punch the caverns. There's no cave boss growing in any of the pasture spaces yet. So we'll have to do that fairly early on. I will be building outside walls. We'll end up with, when we're done, there will be a curtain wall around this space here, and then there will be like a narrow hallway that leads into that square, and that hallway will actually extend out beyond one of these pastures far enough that I can dig a trench for a dry moat. There's three types of moats, and generally speaking, I prefer dry moats to the other two. Someone was asking if we put the grate on the well. Yes, we put that in actually before we put the grate on the fishing area last episode. So all of our grates are installed. We need to get our mason to do these last two squares and then start on a roof on the upper level here so we can get that all boxed in. Constructions don't burn. So walls, especially it's whether they're stone or wood, if they are constructions, they're actually magma safe. That's the weird thing. You can get these weird things where you build walls out of ice that survive stuff. If I have another wildfire, it won't actually advance across the bridges. The bridges will be considered a construction, and basically the fire will burn up to the edge of the bridge and stop. The only things that would be in danger in the event of another wildfire would be stuff outside the walls. There's nothing that stops, say, for example, a hunter showing up in the next wave or two from wandering off to hunt, having another wildfire that sweeps across the map, and he gets caught out there. He's going to be Dwarf Barbecue. There's not a whole lot I can do for him. He's going to die. Which is one of the reasons why I generally avoid hunters as a primary food source. I've used them. I've messed around with them. I think they're great, except for a couple of minor problems, and generally speaking, those minor problems tend to really do them in as a primary resource for me personally. I just find it more convenient, more preferential to use animal husbandry as opposed to butchering wild animals. Have I covered all the questions, guys? I don't know if I missed any. There was kind of a rush on questions there at the beginning. I want to make sure I've covered everybody. Is there any questions we didn't hit? There is a way to limit the hunters on the safe side of the brook, sort of. You can build a burrow that covers only the area you want your hunters to hunt. The problem is animals will wander in and out of that burrow, and so depending on whether the animals are in the burrow, that will trigger them to go hunt the animal, and then the animal will wander out of the burrow, and the hunter will wander back in. And then the animal will wander back into the burrow, and the hunter will go, oh, look, an animal, and he'll run back out to go hunt again, and then the animal will wander out of the burrow and repeat this process ad infinitum. If you're going to deal with wild animals, you would typically build a catcher for them with cage traps. We will go over traps. I don't know if we'll get to it tonight, but I intend to. When we start talking about curtain walls and bridges, traps are not far behind. We will set up defenses that will actually keep out the wagons at some point. This is not. I will first build it like a depot, like right here on the surface. But that's not where my final depot will actually be. My final depot will be down here in the earth somewhere with a ramp that leads back up to the surface so that you can bring the caravans in underground and take them through an underground, trap-laden, archer-covered, siege engine, overwatched kind of pathfinding thing. I'll demonstrate the use of a goblin grinder. I'll demonstrate the use of cage traps and weapon traps. I'll show you how to set up archer overlooks for your approaches. I will demonstrate the use of an animal-powered watchtower. But all those things are fairly intermediate to advanced topics that we may not get to tonight. They may not be until next episode or even the episode after in some cases. Stick with me. I'll go on about all this stuff, before we're done. There's a lot we're going to cover before this fortress falls, hopefully, anyway. If it does fall, I'll start a new one, and I'll keep going until I actually get to the topics that are a little more than just, setting up food and how to butcher animals and so forth. I do like zoos and war animals. You will see me train war animals besides dogs if I can get a mated pair. I will chain them up down below in the ground and basically just let them breed me a set of war animals for use. Typically that takes a few seasons, potentially years to get enough war animals to make it worthwhile, but there's nothing like a set of war grizzly bears by comparison to your war dogs. Let's see, it's 7 o'clock now, I'm pretty sure. In fact, we should have started a couple minutes ago. So for all those of you just joining us, welcome to episode 2. We promised last episode that we would talk about dealing with our food shortage. We got to a state where we're ready to start producing food, but if you actually check our food stock, we're fairly low. We've got only a handful of drinks left, a handful of plants, and some fish. And so I'm going to talk about what you do when you find yourself in this situation where you're not out or where you've just run out, and how you get out of this hole before it consumes your fortress. Reacting at this point right here before things get totally out of hand is ideal. You want to make sure that you're catching it before it gets to the crucial point. Down a few levels here, you're going to find that I've got some stills ready to go, and I think that we actually set them up for brewing, but I don't remember if we have any rock pots ready for them to use. I don't think we do, actually. I think we'll have to make some rock pots. Let's check the stock screen and see what it says. It won't be exact numbers because I don't have a record keeper yet, but it'll give me an idea of what we have for pots and barrels. Let's see here. And I always have to find this stuff, and I probably shouldn't, and this is where Dwarf Monitor plugin comes in handy. There's an additional plugin that enables search, so I can actually search. Now, I don't think I can actually do it on the general screen. I can only do it on the sub-screen. So we have some barrels, but most of those are probably in use. I don't see pots. Bear with me here. I'm looking. I can't remember exactly where rock pots are. Usually when I start making them, I just start cranking them out, and I just don't stop until I have more than I'll ever use. It doesn't matter. We'll make some more. I don't see them, and I'm not going to worry about it. I'm guessing we didn't make any because there's the jobs. Awesome. Let's see what our idlers are doing at the moment and get this show on the road. We've got a stone crafter who's doing absolutely nothing. Well, let's figure out why he's doing absolutely nothing. What's his job in Dwarf Therapist say he's doing? Our stone crafter is sitting there doing squat, and I know for a fact he's got stone crafting, which is what he'll need to make our rock pots. Let's unpause the game for a tick and see what he does. Okay, and it looks like he's going to build buildings, so that's okay. We'll let him get on with that. Let's go ahead and talk about the well. Remember, we built the well earlier, and we never actually connected it up. It's still dry. So let's get a channel punched in to our fortress. This right here will punch a hole into the brook, and it will flood into our well and down the channel all the way to the bottom. It will fill up the channel, and it will flood back up the channel, and it will flood all the way over here to our pressure regulator, which should only be diagonal connections into the well proper. The well will fill up all the way to this floor, but no higher. That's what a pressure regulator does for you guys. That's why I've made those diagonal connections. This well is effectively enemy-proof, maintenance-free. I'll never need to touch it. I simply need to build my wells over the top of it, and it's good forever. If a dwarf falls in, I've got staircases to get him out. I'd have to rig up pumps and use the Moses effect to keep it dry long enough to rescue a corpse. But if a dwarf falls in, he can actually take one step and be on a staircase, and once he hits the staircase, he can just climb straight back out. So in the event that a dwarf does fall in, he's pretty much protected from drowning in that unlikely event. We'll build wells all over this, but I don't want to typically build a well until I have some more valuable items to build the well out of. We'll be looking for metal buckets, for example, metal chains, and metal blocks, and so forth that we can build our well out of. In the meantime, though, I do want to go ahead and set the zone up to make this the water supply. If somebody needs water, this is at least clean water. It may not be perfect because it's not a well, but it is the best water source. And in addition to setting up the zone for the water source, I need to set up the orders for zones to say, hey, if you're going to drink, I want you only to drink from the zone I've provided. Likewise, if you're going to fish, I want you to fish only from the zones I provide. So if they can't do the fishing or do the drinking in the zone I give them, they won't do it. I need to check to make sure I did not actually set up a fishing zone last time, so we're going to need to do that as well. And I'll go ahead and get the floors locked in for our construction here. Okay, that'll get our fishing area floored in, walled over, and locked down so that nothing can get in, not even flying critters. Let's check our stockpiles here and see what we've got on hand. Our metalsmith's forge is ready to be disassembled and carried in. Our smelter is empty. Our wood furnace is empty. We've got some furniture in the carpenter's workshop, some blocks that I really don't care about in the mason's workshop. We will need to get a stockpile for our sandbags, but the milk is being consumed by that cheese-making job we started up last night. So that will consume the milk out of the wagon, and we won't have to worry about transporting that. Once we get a sandbag stockpile set up, we'll have stockpiles for everything that's on the surface except wood, and all of that stuff will be dragged into the fortress and stockpiled appropriately for us. So let's go ahead and modify our temporary stockpile to hold sandbags so we can get that stuff underground. And the only type of furniture I'm allowing is sandbags. We're only going to have 10 of them. We'll never have any more since there's no sand on this map, and I'm not planning to import all that much of it. They'll move the sandbags in, they'll stick them in the stockpile, and we can basically forget about them until we're ready to use them. Now, let's go ahead and get those pastures up and running, and the way we're going to have to do that is we're going to have to connect the caverns. The way pasturing underground works, these are underground pastures. They're not exposed to the surface. They're not connected to any way to the top. In order to be able to use them as pastures, we have to get stuff growing on them. Now, last night when I showed you Reveal, I took you down to the caverns, and you may recall that those were very multicolored looking, and I didn't actually spend a lot of time looking at the caverns. I just kind of showed them to you and went on our way. The caverns are actually covered in mud, usually, and on that mud grows cave moss, and cave moss works just like grass on the surface. So basically you can punch a hole all the way down to the caverns. We'll run down about 20 levels, should be more than enough to get us a connection. And once that connection is done, I can actually wall that connection back up just like I did with the farms. And here's our discovery. Hey, look, we found an expansive cavern. The moment you get this message, your pastures will begin growing cave moss. Now, you may get other messages like, you've discovered a downward passage, which means we found caverns that are actually connected. So this map has 2 levels of caverns, and as it happens, very near to where we made our punch through, there's a passage that connects the upper level to the lower level, and things can wander back and forth between them. So potentially I could get more dangerous critters from the lower level caverns in my upper level caverns, which basically means I have one giant multi-level cavern going on. In addition to our downward passage, we've also discovered a magma pool, a second cavern, that's the second level, the magma pool in the second level, and then it pauses for all those messages. Now what that means to us on the upper floor is that we will actually start to see cave moss begin to grow in our pasture areas. Already you can see there's one little square of it that has just started right there. It takes almost no time at all to start growing. Now, don't immediately pasture your sheep. They're still going to need some grazing, and it takes a while for the cave moss to really take root in those pasture spaces. So you're going to want to give it a season or 2 of lead time before you actually get them pastured. We could pasture the pigs now since they are not grazers, but I'll just leave them on the surface for now, and we'll pasture everything at once and not worry about it. Now, we've got our crops. Our farmer is busy planting down here, but we're down to our last drink, and so now it's really time to start thinking about, well, how are we going to deal with that booze thing that I keep promising we're going to talk about and we haven't really done. Our carpenter is not really doing anything at the moment, so we're going to make him into a brewer, and he'll start on the brewing jobs. If necessary, I'll take my mason off masonry and have him build. He's forging a tool, which is probably the rock pots we've been looking for. Let's double check on him, because I think he's doing exactly what we need him to do right now. Yep, here's our mason, and he's actually making our rock pots for us at the moment. While he's making the rock pots, our carpenter can begin brewing booze, and we'll start using up those last few plants we have to get some plump helmet wine, just to tie us over until we have some better plant stockpiles going. Right now, at the moment, we've just got the plants we brought with us at Embark, so we're down to those 5 plants, and we've just used the last of the booze. Let's see what our carpenter is doing. Oh, he's still making cheese. Oh, how lovely. But our hauler has brew, and he's coming along to do the brewing now. That'll get us the booze. That'll just basically rebuild our booze stockpile immediately. Now, it won't get us a large quantity, and it'll all be of one type, which has its own problems. But this is just a stopgap measure. Our crops are being planted as we speak, and hey, look, bang, there's 30 booze back in the stockpile. So that 2-second moment where we run out, and presto, it's right back again. Now, we still have only a little bit of food. We'll need to deal with food. That's where butchering comes in. I'm going to hold off for a minute and see if we can get a migration wave in, so I can, dedicate people a little bit better than we currently have to those tasks. See if maybe I can't get some folks to do those tasks a little more permanently instead of assigning one of my dwarves temporarily to them. We've got a fair amount of cheese. We've got some fish. We're not in any danger of running out of food at the moment. Let's go check on our forges down here. Down here in the bowels of the earth, we created a forge level and we created a magma storage, but we didn't actually connect the magma storage to the volcano yet. So let's start talking about that. Typically, what I will do for a magma storage chamber is just dig a tunnel. And unlike water, it doesn't matter whether there's any upstairs, whether you're using stairs for the tunnel or not, because frankly, it won't matter. Magma has no problem with trees. So we'll go ahead and get a connection all the way over here to the magma. Now, you might be tempted to do something silly like punch a hole in the side of the volcano and let it flood, and what you'll end up with is a burned miner. That's terrible. Don't do it. I have done it that way. It's a great way to use up sacrificial haulers if you end up with too many dwarves and you need to get rid of one. Give one a cheap pick, tearing off all the mining on all your other dwarves, have one miner, tell him to go punch a hole in the wall and watch as he burns to death before he gets back to safety. That's good sacrifice play. Okay, so what we're going to do instead, though, is we're actually going to dig a staircase, and I'm going to dig, just like my central staircase, a large staircase up to the magma floor all the way at the top. The way this will work is we will dig out. See, look, there's a wildfire. Something is triggering those wildfires from time to time, so we're going to get another wildfire spreading out over our area here. Aren't we glad we have most of our stuff in the ground? Now, I don't actually want to take this all the way up to the top. I want to take it one level below that and have this be a downward staircase. We'll do a downward staircase there. Now, what we'll do is, on this upper level, which I will dig out plain, we will punch a hole downward from here with a channel, which will take out this wall safely from above, and the magma from the volcano will spill into the staircase, drop all the way down to the bottom of the pipe, and run into our magma storage chamber. Now, I have had cases where, for whatever reason, the magma doesn't get all the way over here. It doesn't start filling up the chamber properly. It starts evaporating before it gets, the chamber filled properly. We'll deal with that when we get to it. There's a solution for it. It involves building multiple tunnels for the magma, making multiple magma taps. Not a big deal. You'll tap it the same way you did for this first tap. Sometimes it does that on this map. Sometimes it doesn't. Who knows? Maybe it's connected to the mystery wildfires. I'd love to know what's actually causing them up here. As you can see, the grass had pretty well recovered, and now all of a sudden we've got another wildfire that's spreading out. My guess is there's a fire ant playing around somewhere on the map, and he's going to hose us up good if we're not careful. See, there's a deceased weasel now. None of my guys are hunters, and I can't zoom to that dead animal. So wherever it is, it fell in the magma maybe, or got too close to the edge and got hit with a fireball. No idea. But notice where this fire appears to be burning from, and it's following You know, I'll bet if I were to have caught this sooner, I would find a weasel corpse somewhere in this area where he got too close to the edge, and a fire imp fireballed him before he could get back to safety. And then, of course, he runs back into the bushes and sets the world on fire. So, while that's burning itself out across our entire world map again, let's talk about getting our dwarves back to safety if we can here. We're not just going to be able to dig a trench, I don't think, around this space fast enough to get our dwarves into safety. Our dogs there are probably going to get incinerated before I can get them underground, for example. Things in this trench that we dug for that first wildfire, of course, are safe. If we don't have dwarves underground doing jobs, they'll survive quite nicely. There'll be no risk there. The job in this is suspended, so other than the dogs, which I probably need to move underground if possible, let's go ahead and get a see if we can't get those dogs underground. As you can see, this wildfire is not nearly as aggressive as that first one, but it is going to burn this direction, and we are eventually going to have to worry about it. So this is another reason why we're going to want curtain walls at some point, just so we can build an area that's safe from whatever the hell is causing all these wildfires over and over again.
You dwarves may have spotted me, but you will not catch me.
Oh, and he's going to run right for the... Oh! And I think the dogs all survived. None of them are on fire. How about that? I don't think it will. We had grass on the lower level previously, and I don't think it actually burned it last time, but we'll find out. So far, so good. Our kobold thief died along the way. We'll have to go see if his corpse is actually recoverable. Just for grins and giggles, let's see if anybody got wounded in this. We'll temporarily make one of my guys a chief medical dwarf. Hey, look, and the migrants showed up just in time to get burned alive by the wildfire. Awesome. Okay, when you appoint a chief medical dwarf, you will have access to the health section of the main stocks screen here. Let's see if anybody's got any diagnosis requests. No, it looks like everybody's managed to avoid getting burned, including the animals. If it didn't die in the fire, it's survived nicely. Go dwarves. With the migrants arriving now, of course, we now need to deal with the next migration wave. So we'll go back over to Therapist. And we go from 10 dwarves up to 17, so there's 7 in that second wave. Our third wave will be larger still. So now we'll go ahead and we'll sort them by migration wave. And I'll make everybody haulers as before. Now there's one gotcha here, and it's not a big one. It's a really minor thing that you could really ignore and get away with it. No real harm will come of it. But see this guy here, Aerith Deduca... Yeah, whatever. He's a hunter. You can tell he's a hunter because he's got the hunting skill. Now he came with hunting skill enabled, and I turned it off. Now, what that will do is that he will actually drop his quiver, bolts, crossbow right on the edge of the map. And the problem you're going to run into there is that kobolds love to steal stuff, and crossbows and bolts and so forth. Yeah, they'll step right onto the map, steal that stuff, and then step right back off before you can prevent them in a lot of cases. So we'll go ahead and leave him as a hunter temporarily, and let him exhaust his supply of bolts trying to supply us with some food. We'll in fact make him into our custom professor. I think I have a military profession for crossbowmen, and we'll just make him into one of the crossbowmen for later. Now, when I sort by profession, again, you're going to see I have a large number of peasants. Let's look through them and see if any of them have any really useful skills we want to hang on to. Here's a leather-working, wood-crafting bone carver. We have 2 bone carvers now. Not that I particularly care about that skill in particular. Several people have fishing, a bunch of the nonsense, don't care about it types of skills. Nothing in the metalsmithing category, for example, or the gem setting category, or masonry that I really would care about. I don't know if the fire will destroy what he has on him. Let's go take a look. Let's see if we can find his corpse first off. So there he is, his various parts for where the dogs mauled him, and the items he had on him. I could care less about small clothing. Small clothing is too small for my dwarves to wear, but silver daggers can be melted down later for a source of silver. So we're going to go ahead and grab that and drop it into the weapons stockpile while we're at it. At this point, the wildfire has basically passed us and is on down around the headed off to the southwest. Hopefully the migrants will avoid it as well as they come in from the northwest. You can see the wildfire is going to just absolutely devastate the landscape like it did the first time. There's not much you can do about a wildfire. I could theoretically dig myself a water-filled moat. That would do it. We may do that, in fact, at some point. But if I do that, it will impact my tree farming later. And the whole goal of all of this preparation, all of this process that we're undergoing right now, is to get us off the surface, to remove our dependency on goods from the surface, on items that are only found on the surface. I'm going to take surface crops and move them downstairs. I'm going to take trees and I'm going to move all the wood downstairs. All the wood our carpenter just cut is all gone again. We're going to have to cut a new set of logs, and again, we're starting off with 0 logs, so we've wasted our logs again. At this point, since this is now our second wildfire running, it probably behooves us to start thinking about how we're going to deal with wildfire prevention. Smokey the Bear here is probably going to be real happy with us because only we can prevent wildfire. As before, the area to the left of the brook, this small little 1/5 of the map up here, will survive just fine, but everything else is going to burn, burn, burn. The good news is that the trees don't burn and the shrubs don't burn, so the things we actually care about are going to be here. And because we dug those trenches out in the first episode, we've got an area where the grazers can survive until the cave moss is ready to support them. As you can see, the cave moss is starting to take root nicely. In addition to the cave moss, you start to get underground plants. These are exactly like the plants that my underground farms are being planted. They can be picked. They will produce. They can be produced booze and such, just like the regular plants that you're growing in your farms if you pick them. So what we're probably going to do here is start working ourselves on a plant gatherer. This guy here I'm going to use as my plant gatherer. In fact, he has a couple of skills I actually care about keeping. I'm going to probably make him into a farmer at some point in the future, and he'll do a little bone carving for us on the side perhaps. But for right now, I need somebody to do plant gathering. I have nobody skilled in plant gathering. He's going to work just fine. So we'll designate an area, hopefully in the wildfire burned area, so that he doesn't get anywhere near that issue, and we'll have him deal with the plant gathering. He'll start off with almost no skill. He'll take forever and a day to actually start getting any plants of any sort, but you got to start somewhere, and we need to get some of these surface plants downstairs. So we're going to designate this area right around the fort itself for picking, and he'll go along and pick all those surface plants. And with any luck, he'll deliver a few surface plants down here to the main, plant stockpile for surface plants, and they'll get pulled from there down into the main food stockpile for later use. Let's check in on our booze. We're still doing okay there. We've got some more plants now from where we've started to harvest our farms. We've still got some cheese and some fish, so we're doing okay on those things, but we probably want to start thinking about a more permanent stone crafter who can make rock pots for us. We don't have any other skilled stone crafters, and I like, if I have people who have a skill I don't really care about, I would rather preserve people who have a skill than people who don't. So this guy is going to become one of our stone workers, even though that's not one of his skills. I will have other people who will do leather working and bone carving, and if I can convert him to a stone crafter or to a mason, I would rather he get a mood from that than do a mood for bone carving and make a bone flute, for example, or something equally useless to me. Once he gets a little bit more skill making stone crafting items, so what we'll do is we'll kind of cheat and we'll assign this guy only to masonry and that guy only to stone crafting, and so they won't overlap, and we'll have both jobs getting run at once. Let's go ahead downstairs here and get him a rock pot job created. I'll need the nest boxes as well for egg laying from my birds. Let's get those birds up and running. We'll get our mason making blocks again. I also want to make tables and chairs, and I'm going to promote the chairs up so that there's a pair of these. There's two pairs, so it's table, throne, table, throne. In fact, I'm going to do it throne, table personally. Dwarves will complain about there not being enough chairs, but they usually won't complain about there being no tables. So at this point, I will only be able to build as many tables as I have chairs. So they'll build a chair, and then I won't be able to build a table until I have a chair that matches it. You want to be careful. It's a minor thought. It's a real minor thing. Your dwarves will actually get an unhappy thought if they go to sit in a chair and there's no chair next to the table that they're trying to use. We'll use these thrones and tables both for assigning our first couple of manually assigned nobles, the manager and the bookkeeper. We'll go ahead and get a pair of those started, and as well we'll use them to start populating our dining room. Stone furniture is not particularly valuable, but we're going to jam a fair amount of it in here, and our mason is reasonably high skilled, so by the time he gets enough of the furniture built to actually fill up the dining room and we get it smoothed and engraved, this will be a very high quality dining room despite the low value of the items in it. Simply by virtue of their number and the other things we're doing to increase the value of the room. Let's look and see what else we've got that we might conceivably need or want at this point. We're starting to get enough dwarves that we want to start thinking about making sure we always have enough farmers, and so I'm going to go ahead and add this guy who has some farming skill to the farmer rotation. He does have some other skills. He can do cheese making and dyeing if I cared. I'm not worried about whether my dwarves look good. I'm worried about whether they survive at this point. We'll worry about fashion down the road. For right now, let's concentrate on, does it keep our dwarves alive or not? We'll need to make some more wooden training axes. I'm reasonably certain by now some or all of our wooden training axes have been burned up by multiple wildfires, and our haulers, you'll notice, all have wood cutting. We'll need to make sure that they have axes and that they can move that stuff downstairs. Lastly, let's go ahead and get, we've got space here for the dining room when we get it built. Let's go ahead and get a wood storage floor built where we'll do our carpentry. That way we can move some wood underground and hopefully have some wood survive one of these wildfires instead of constantly getting burned up repeatedly. We'll go ahead and make that out of blocks. Here's an interesting bug for you out there in viewer land. Notice the negative distance. Yeah. I'm thinking that happens when the item in question gets destroyed. So these were logs that were on the surface that the game hasn't effectively removed yet, and so it goes to calculate the distance and gets this random wacko weird number. There's no way that there's a negative distance to our palm logs, but there it is. I'll have to... I've got a world that has this feature saved where it happened to a day site block I'll have to report it to the Mantis and the Bug Tracker at some point. Let's go ahead and get our carpentry shop built. We'll get a bowyer's workshop. Now, I typically don't build bows out of wood. You can. They certainly will work. I typically don't rely on crossbows a whole lot in the early game. I prefer to have dwarves who are well armored and well equipped for fighting things up close. Wooden crossbows and bone crossbows